Welcome to the human experience. In this first episode, we will have Vern Neufeld Redekop, an Emeritus professor from Ottawa. Welcome, Professor Dr. Vern Neufeld Redekop.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Yannick.
Really nice having you on the show. Who is Vern Neufeld Redekop?
Well, looking at my life, I can see that I am somebody who values deep connections with other people, someone who is very curious, always asking why and wanting to understand more profoundly the big questions of life, and particularly how they relate to me. And I guess someone reflexive and reflective in that any ideas I discover, I need to apply to my own life. So if ideas can't be the basis for my own life relationships and actions, then they aren't that valuable to me. So I'm somebody who has hit rock bottom, who has experienced failures, and who has connected with an amazing number of people, all of whom have enriched my life. And I guess central to who I am is that my lifelong partner in discovery and facing the world and its crises is Gloria Neufeld Redekop, and I put the name Neufeld into my academic writings, even though officially I'm Vernon William Redekop. I go by Vern Neufeld Redekop because I want to honor Gloria by putting the Neufeld part in there.
Were there any significant experiences that you had in the past that significantly shaped the human that you have become today?
Yeah. So in my youth, at the end of grade 7, I had spent the summer with my great-grandfather studying the book of Revelation because he had been a Bible teacher. And I had built up a particular worldview, which came crashing down when I was 20, at a time when I almost committed suicide because I was desperate. I didn't see my way out of my situation. And I won't get into the details of all of that, but just to say I hit rock bottom, and for a month every day I asked myself very deliberately, do I want to live today? And I said, yes, I will do that. And at the heart of that time, when things were most intense, I saw my typewriter and I thought, oh, I could use that. So I, one weekend, wrote 28 pages of poetry. That experience of seeing the desperate side of life, if you like, enabled me in later years to connect with people who had experiences very different from mine. At one time, I was actively engaged with prisoners in Montreal, and I was able to connect with them, coming out of that experience. And then there were a number of times where involuntarily I had to leave a situation, and each of those led to new openings. In 1982, I'd been working on an MA in Hebrew Bible, and Gloria doing one in Greek New Testament, and we thought we had an opening in Ottawa. It fell apart the last minute, so we went up to Thompson, Manitoba, way up north. And one key thing about Thompson is I started a journey with Indigenous people, which continued from there and wouldn't have happened otherwise. But then we had to leave Thompson, and then we came here to Ottawa without me having a job, and for Gloria to start her doctoral program. And I worked for an NGO, a national body, and that gave me significant experience. But then I had to leave that. And in an amazing kind of way, I got a position working for the Spicer Commission as an analyst. Gloria and I both did. And for the first time in our married life, we had some extra money, which opened the door then to me doing a PhD program. And then in the process, I became a trainer with the Canadian Institute for Conflict Resolution, became president, and that enabled me to get involved with people from Rwanda. Richard Batsanduka started third-party neutral training there, and Vesna Dazovic-Markovic started third-party neutral training in Bosnia. And this led me into those two worlds in a very deep kind of way. But then I had to leave CICR, and that leaving for me was devastating, but it opened the door to me then being hired to start a master's in conflict studies at St. Paul University. So at each of these times where I came to an end in a way that was kind of devastating, it always opened up new possibilities. And so I guess I've learned certain things from that, but one of them being that you have to flow with what comes your way. And if you're open to new possibilities, these new opportunities arise in the wake of what could be framed as failures.
Do you have any special attributes that you could potentially pin down that made you the person that you become today?
Well, I think a key part of it is the reflexivity, the idea of applying ideas to myself and reflecting on that, getting on the balcony and saying, what's really going on here, and testing the ideas. So I'll give you some examples. When I had my crisis at 20, I in many respects wiped my intellectual or my commitment or religious slate clean, because there were a lot of things that didn't work for me anymore. And so very carefully, I selected things through time that did connect. So when I came across the writings of René Girard about mimetic desire, that is, we imitate the desires of others and we really want what other people have. Part of the reason I came to appropriate that concept as something essential was that it shed light on my own experience, because I could start to see how I had been driven by mimetic desire in relationship to some people who were in my life. And so it made sense. And likewise, the idea of scapegoating. I experienced the idea of a collective turning on me. And so I'd experienced that. So because I experienced it and the theory helped me make light of, help me understand my own situation, I thought this is something worth appropriating and building on and so on. And so that the use of theory then to reflect on my own life always has given me a way of building up my insights. So you know, there have been a number of these key moments, if you like, or key individuals whose thought has really helped illuminate what I stand for, if you like.
You have been married to your wife, Gloria, for more than 50 years. Can you elaborate a little bit what this means to you, your life, and your career as an outstanding scholar?
Yes. Well, first of all, every relationship is like a narrative. It goes on through time. And there are times in any narrative where things are really good, and there are times when things are really challenging and push you to your limits. Like you wonder, how on earth are you going to take the next step? And so I think the idea of covenant in the Hebrew Bible as a diachronic mutual commitment has helped to get through difficult times. And I remember years ago, I was reading an interview with Malcolm Muggeridge, and Malcolm Muggeridge had at that time been married a long time. And so here's what he said. He said, if divorce would have been as socially acceptable back in our younger years as it is today, when he was being interviewed, he said, my wife and I would have got divorced several times over. But when I reflect back on why we might have got a divorce, those things in hindsight seem so trivial. And that reflection on his part really helped put things into perspective, because in the heat of the moment, you can have a conflict or a challenge, and you wonder, how on earth is this going to work? How on earth are we going to get through this? But when you reflect on that, and you can say, what over the long term, there is an inherent good in the longevity of the relationship, and you think about all the other people who might be affected and so on, then you get whatever it takes to move ahead. And at various times, we've each taken initiative that just helps move the relationship along in a good place. And at the beginning of our relationship, both of us had been hurt and faced personal challenges, and we were able to be a very important support, inspiration in terms of how to reframe and understand what we were going through and get the support we needed to move ahead individually and personally. So it started a journey that led to our growth. Now, I was a feminist back when we got married, and I didn't identify myself as that, but I can say that I was, because I believed in an equal relationship back when we were first married, and I've since been influenced by feminist thinkers who helped me see more deeply into the oppressive nature of patriarchal societies. Gloria subsequently did become a feminist herself, and through looking at life through her eyes, I got to see more deeply what women's experience was. And there were these aha moments where I had a jump in consciousness. So one of those was because of my belief in this equality. I thought if I was doing half the work and preparing meals, I was doing my part. You split the tasks and you get it done together. And then, but Gloria had this feeling that there was an imbalance, and it took a while before we could put our finger on it. But then all of a sudden we realized that half the effort of meal preparation is the planning what you're going to have, making certain that you have all the ingredients, and thinking ahead about how one meal leads to the other and what you're going to do. And all of that effort on the planning department is like half the work. So I was doing only half the work. I was only doing a quarter of the work. And that aha experience then enabled me to readjust my behavior and become more engaged in the planning, for instance. And it becomes a metaphor then for how having an openness to listen and reduce defensiveness, because often when something is pointed out that we're doing that's not quite up to par, we can become defensive, and I've done my share of that. But if you can get beyond that and get on the balcony and look at your life objectively and say, okay, what really is going on here, then you can say, I've got some adjustments to make. And all of those then lead to a joy, because you start to say, oh, I can do better, and lead to growth, lead to humility, because you haven't done it right all along, and you have to grow in certain ways, and it leads to a certain empathy. So So this idea of, and if, as you look at it, you start to see even in difficulties, like Gloria had extreme Lyme disease, and I had to, at the beginning, I had to be within touching distance 24/7. Like I did my work with her feet on my lap and on my laptop at the beginning. But you start to realize that out of that time, it was almost like a sustained retreat of came creativity and a chance to finish some books and so on. So there was blessing in the midst of adversity, if you like, and being able to see those things, I think, has been important in moving ahead.
And what made you change gears? In other words, you intended to study physics, however, you changed. What initiated this change? And I think it has truly to do what you have been through and what you just described previously. Can you give us a little bit a view how this ultimately unfolded?
Mm-hmm. Well, my interest in physics had to do with this curiosity. What lies behind matter? What lies behind? It was always what lies behind, so we know about atoms and protons and neutrons, but what lies behind that? What are protons made of? What are neutrons made of? And then elementary particles, and how do they interact? And how does that understanding give us, and what lies behind that? It was a curiosity that just kept pushing, and physics was a way of doing that. And I also loved mathematics, which was closely associated. But after my first year university, I had this unique opportunity because I had previously been involved in Model UNs. I was part of the one and only International Model Security Council. And it was because a friend of mine had the connections. And anyway, I was head of the Spanish delegation at this International Model United Nations in New York, meeting with ambassadors and with the Spanish mission to the UN. And I was just totally intrigued by that. So it gave me a sense of being interested in the international side of things really much. So I switched to political science, but then I had this identity kind of situation come up where I really hit rock bottom, and I didn't go to class, went to the art gallery instead. And so my marks were really poor. So I figured I don't have a future in political science because I have got this bad transcript. And then I switched to philosophy, which was another way of pursuing some of the questions that I had. But then went on a long time getting married, and we spent some time in Phoenix, Arizona. And then I thought, well, whatever I'm going to do probably demands good verbal skills. And where do you get good verbal skills? Nothing's better than teaching for that. So I became a teacher for a couple of years. And then went to Montreal, where I was in charge of a community center, and my world again expanded. I was really involved with prisoners and with street people, homeless people, immigrants, and many different worlds were there for me to engage in. And so, and then I thought, well, I'll reflect on this. And I'd always been curious about where did my faith perspective come from, and again, pushing those questions. Christianity evolved out of Judaism, and how did Judaism come to be? And to understand that, you have to understand ancient Near East, and you have to understand Hebrew, and so on. So I did an MA in Hebrew Bible, so I could pursue those particular questions. And then we went to Thompson for a few years. So I started on the Indigenous, started with Indigenous people, and then into criminal justice issues and so on. So I worked on a variety of things. When it finally was an option for me to do my PhD, one of the things in Thompson had been a little peace group, and we had in 1984 invited an economist from Winnipeg to speak to our peace group, and he said, you know, there's a famine going on in Ethiopia and food is used as a weapon. So thousands of people are starving, not because food is not available, but it's being withheld. And I figured, why on earth do people commit atrocities? What leads people to do that? How can that be among us as human beings? So I thought if I ever had the chance, I wanted to do my homework on understanding why and how people commit atrocities. And so when I had a chance to do a PhD, I wanted to do that. And because my MA was in Hebrew Bible, it meant I had to do it in theology. And so I went to St. Paul University, and they had a breadth of great scholars, especially, and I chose the ethics stream, and I had professors and an advisor that really provided a great context for me to push this issue of trying to understand that in a multidisciplinary kind of way. And actually, I had to do a makeup year, and I did this doctoral seminar, and the doctoral seminar back then was based on the research of the professor who was doing that. So Professor Ken Melchin was researching ethics of regional economic development. And at the beginning, my heart fell because I wanted to study deep-rooted conflict, but I made the most of it. So I wrote a 100-page paper on deep-rooted conflict as a factor in regional economic development. And incidentally, and this is a really cool thing, after I'd done that year-long seminar, I went to my daughter's dance class, and who should be there but Ovid Mercredi, the national chief of the Assembly of First Nations. And he looked at me as though he maybe recognized me because I had been in Thompson, and you know, that's northern Manitoba, and he was an Indigenous leader in Manitoba at that time. So I went up to him and introduced myself, and the first words out of his mouth were, Vern Redekop, consultant, can you do something on economic development? And because I had done a year of study on regional economic development, I was primed for that. So I did 3 contracts with the Assembly of First Nations on that particular issue. And I'd sometimes say to Harold Tarbell, who was the right-hand person to the national chief, I said, you know, I shouldn't really be doing this, but you know, an Indigenous person should. And he said, we invited you here, and when your work is done, we'll let you know. And you know, it was like an affirmation. And at another time, I was having coffee with some of the women. They said, have you seen the elder yet? And I said, no. One of them left. A little while later, here's the elder. Come with me. Come with me. So we went into this little room, and he said, what brought you here? And I told him the story about the dance class over at Mercredi. And he said, the children have called you. The children have called you. So everything you do is going to be good. And that affirmation, it was just absolutely amazing. And it was an instance of a very deep and profound inclusion in the world of Indigenous people. Like, they had invited me, they had called me, and I did what I could to work on the issues that were provided to me.
What is, according to you, or at least for you, the meaning of life?
I think life is this flow. It's a flow through time. And philosopher Paul Ricoeur has talked about 2 dimensions of that. There is the idem dimension. There's the development of key characteristics in a synchronic, like a snapshot of characteristics. But then there's the ipsa dimension, which for him is the flow. It's all time related. And so when you want to look at life, it's not only life as a snapshot with certain characteristics, but life is a flow that moves around all the time. And so in that movement, you can see the evolution of the creative evolution of new things, new thoughts, new ideas, and so on, and a constant evolving of new possibilities. And you can also see the consolidation of certain things where something that is shown to have value at one particular time becomes the basis to build on it, and so on. So life is change, but at the same time, it's the consolidation of things that are valuable. And when you think about one's own life, it's just one blip in the bigger flow of life, if you like. And everybody's life changes the overall flow somewhat. And so some people say that they want to change the world. Well, they are changing the world because everybody is changing the world, because everybody contributes somehow to changing this big flow. And some very gifted people have caught on to the bigger picture of this flow that transcends individuals, or even transcends humans, that includes the animal world and the flow of nature and so on. And some people have tapped into this and have written things that provide an incisive look at their particular time into what's going on. And so we value these as insightful spiritual teachers. And so when we read their writings, they become a prism by which we can look at our own lives in new kinds of ways.
Do you practice some sort of philosophy, teaching, or religion? And if so, can you give us a glimpse what it means and what it does to your life and for your life?
Well, why don't we think about religion as having several key components. First of all, it's identified, it has a name. Second, it has a story. It has developed through time. It often has writings, and it has a communal dimension to it. And it has certain rules of rightness that have to do with practice, has to do with what people are with what people do when they gather together, but also how they live their lives. So from that point of view, you can look at the Mennonite faith as having a story, a history that actually goes back to the whole Christian story, because it's all rooted in the Judaic-Christian story as a whole. But back starting in 1925 or 1525, a group of people said, there's something that doesn't feel right about what's going on in the Catholic Church. And they came up with this idea that, really, there should be a separation between church and state, that physical, material things in and of themselves don't have an intrinsic power to change things. Rather, it's the symbolic nature of what we do and how we make meaning of things that's more important than any material things. And how that comes through in the Catholic Church, they have the Eucharist, which, as long as you take the Eucharist, it's supposed to make a change. A material object becomes an agent of change, whereas for Mennonites, they go through having wine or grape juice and bread, but the physical part of it doesn't intrinsically make the change. It's the meaning that we bring to it, and so on. So the Mennonite story includes taking a stand for peace, non-resistance, loving one's enemies, and baptism of adults. So those were part of the rules of rightness that emerged in the 1500s. And insofar as all of my ancestors are part of that, including a group, a reform group in Russia that formed called the Mennonite Brethren, that's part of my story, and I'm a member of the Mennonite Church. But my own identity is far greater than that, because if you think about this idea of a collective having rules of rightness and immersing oneself in that, I've had occasion to do that with Indigenous people. So part of me, I feel part of the inside of me is Indigenous. I'm a lifelong member of the Manitoba Métis Federation, for instance. So that's something like that. I've engaged deeply with Jewish people and have really been deeply blessed through what I've learned through engagement with Jewish people. I'm comfortable in a synagogue. Gloria and I did a whole Jewish pilgrimage in Europe where we went to Auschwitz, we went to the Jewish Museum in Warsaw, we went to the Jewish Museum in Berlin, we went to Worms, where the oldest synagogue is in Germany, and so on. And when we came back, we reported at Temple Israel at a Reform synagogue, and we were introduced by Truda Rosenberg as having Jewish souls. And likewise, I've worshiped in a mosque with Muslims. I've been an active part of a Muslim-Christian dialogue. And I've also been part of a research project on spirituality, emergent creativity, and reconciliation, which brought me into through Stuart Kaufman's ideas, into an evolutionary-based sense of emergence and so on, and that's been part of it. So, so my identity, in terms of the question you ask, is a complex one that involves a multiple indwellings of religious bodies or perspectives.
To conclude, your advice for a fulfilling and meaningful life?
I guess a key word that comes to me is an openness. I once thought of this aphorism: always be open to surprises of the spirit, but always be open to something that is greater than yourself, that you can access if you just open yourself to it. So one of the things that Gloria and I do, we have daily readings, some from the Bible, some from other sources. And twice we've gone through a book of readings of Rumi's poetry, a gift from one of my students, actually. And Rumi has this image of somebody with a big basket of fresh bread on their head. They've got this abundance of bread, and they're going around asking for crusts of bread because they're hungry. And they're totally oblivious to the fact that they have this rich resource right at their fingertips, literally. They could just reach up and they could have all the bread they wanted. But yet they're going around as though they're hungry and in poverty, and they have no food around. And Rumi uses similar image. You're in this clear, fresh water that's so pure you could drink it, and you're walking in it up to your knees, and it's around you all the time. And you're going around asking for somebody if they can spare a cup of water, so you can maybe have a meager cup of water because you're thirsty, not realizing that you have this stream around you and you have an abundance around you. And I think being openness and always trying to open your eyes, your ears, your heart to what's available around you. And I think about the Jewish philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, who says that each individual is like an infinite universe revealed in the face. And so if we're searching for the infinite, I mean, all we have to do is meet one other person and truly open ourselves to them, and we're opening ourselves to the infinite. And so we have these rich resources that are available to everybody, because everybody has some people around them. And so just being open to that, and then letting the other change oneself, be open to growing and changing and and so on. And if you're fortunate enough to have somebody to be on a lifelong journey with you, just cherish that and put energy into making the most of it.
Professor Vern Neufeld Redekop, apart from my grandparents, my late grandparents, and of course my parents, I think there's no one in this world in terms of thinking and being who has so tremendously shaped my life. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, and I appreciate that that affirmation deeply. I don't take it lightly, and one never knows the impact they have on other people. And I could say it's a great blessing to me for you to just take an interest in my life as you have, and that in turn enriches me.
Professor Vern Neufeld Redekop,